Arsenal men and Arsenal women both had to wear black in their trips to Tottenham, but it did not matter one bit because North London remains very much red rather than white. Alessia Russo got Arsenal going in just the second minute before goals from Frida Maanum and substitute Stina Blackstenius, as Arsenal completed yet another memorable day out on the other side of North London. All of us were there from the Gooner, and it made for an even more memorable occasion. I was with Claudia Loy and Leif Yusuf in the press box. Susie Lysett was pitch side as ever, and got some great footage of Lotte Wubben-Moy and some of those other childhood Gooners enjoying the win at full time. Daisy, you were in the prime position in the stands. The first chant of "What do we think of Tottenham" went up about 7 seconds before Russo scored. So you've got to take the credit.
Absolutely. I mean, I was just lo laughing at the fact that everyone else is in the professional settings, and then there's me representing the Gooner from the away section. But absolutely fantastic game, fantastic atmosphere from the start. I was surprised. I mean, not surprised because you know what Arsenal are like, but the amount that were there, filling up the stands, way before the game had even started, and the reception from the very start. We know what to expect from the chants in that kind of game, but it caught us by surprise, the goal. Mainly, I mean, I imagine it did you too, and the people watching at home, but especially the away section because we were mid chant, and I think everybody, instead of sort of cheering, just sort of stood around and went, "What the hell just happened?" I don't think we're used to it, are we? With just yet with Arsenal scoring so early on and taking the lead in such a big game, and really, actually, it came out of nothing. Deflection with the pass, obviously, and then Russo just taking it first time. Something we've gone on and on about, Arsenal doing more. So yeah, amazing reception from the away end, obviously, but caught us by surprise for sure.
Yeah, I think the ease at which Arsenal were able to move the ball in the midfield and the ease at which they were able to get into the box with it, if I was on the Spurs side, I would not be happy. And that's almost a frustrating thing is obviously we lost to Spurs last season, lost at West Ham last season, we've beaten both of them, but they've both not provided a challenge. We
Yeah.
probably hoped for a little bit more of a challenge from Brighton, expected a little bit more from Juventus, and obviously Arsenal have come through all of the challenges. But Spurs were another team who I just thought were really, really poor and have got a lot of soul searching to do. They've obviously had a tough run of fixtures at the start of the season, but tactically, I don't know if it was what Renee did or if it was the shortcomings of Robert Villahamn. To be fair, I think Arsenal countered them very well. The fact that Spurs were sort of changing formation, not once but twice, I think, during the course of the game. But I still, there are people on the camp of almost we need a tougher test. And of course, you can only beat who's in front of you. But the fact Arsenal have gone to two places where they lost last season and won, that's a tick next to Renee's name, isn't it? But another team beaten who were very underwhelming.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we came into this, recorded a few weeks back, looked at those tough run of fixtures and really went, God, a derby, which we lost obviously last season, a Manchester United side who provided a tough challenge, I thought, but we could have and should have won that game. And then obviously we were scared a little bit about, I was specifically scared about Brighton, then coming into the Champions League and needing those wins. And obviously all of those games didn't go the way that I would have expected, but in a positive way. And I think, like you say, you can only beat what's in front of you. On paper, when we looked at these fixtures, they should have been tough. I thought, especially with Spurs, they were off the mark completely. And I don't even know if it was tactically. I mean, it's a derby. Everyone says that form doesn't matter going into a derby. Yes, they've had a tough start to the season. It has been difficult for them, but I just think they were completely complacent. Even if you watch the way that Arsenal were moving the ball around, the pressing for Tottenham was completely off. I mean, they were miles away from getting anywhere near the Arsenal players. And yeah, you've got to say well done for getting that tactically right. Arsenal in the way that they, the link up play has been amazing. We saw that against Juventus for Frida Maanum's goal. Very similar kind of play that we've gone for, and it is working. And teams aren't, I don't think, are pressing Arsenal as much as they should really to win that ball back. So I think it's a combination of both, but I do think, it's hard not to give credit. I think obviously she's not just come into this and scraped by and got through. She's come into this, as an interim role at the start, and she's beaten teams confidently, and we've finished games off by scoring goals. That's exactly what we asked for. So it's really difficult to not praise her for that. And I do think obviously there are some tougher tests. It depends what happens after this international break, but I do think she's capable of that. And it'll be interesting to see what the club think. Obviously, that's a huge sort of question mark at the moment.
Yeah, and we're going to come into this tomorrow night. We'll come on to it more at the end of the show, but we're looking at doing a sort of instant reaction after the Juventus game because it's quite a good time to do it in terms of talking straight away about what next for Renee Slegers. So we're going to save that for tomorrow night after what could be her final game in charge. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? But the thing for me is I think the fear factor is back with Arsenal. I think watching Everton, how they sort of turned up to the Emirates and just sat back, played for a nil-nil draw, even created a couple of chances. Leicester almost, I still think Leicester were really unlucky not to get anything out of their game against us. Arsenal should be, putting these goals past teams like Brighton. Of course, it's great to see them progressing, and we've talked about that a lot in terms of those mid-table teams moving up the league. But when you watch Chelsea and City as comparisons and see what they do to some of these sides, we saw City batter Spurs the week before, and as Arsenal, you want Spurs thinking, goodness me, we've got Arsenal next. And if Jonas Eidevall was still in charge, perhaps, and Arsenal was still on this rocky run of form, then that fear factor maybe isn't quite there, even though Arsenal do have the squad depth. So I do think Renee sort of reinstilled that belief, that confidence in the Arsenal players, and in doing so, that fear factor in who we're coming up against. And Spurs in the build-up talked a lot about the fact that they beat Arsenal at home last year, but this was just such a different game. Look, one shot, one goal to go 1-0 up after failing to score from 32 or something last year. That's obviously a massive boost, but all three of the Arsenal goals sort of coming from central areas is something I spoke to Renee about after, and she said, talking about recognizing, when to go wide and when to play through the middle. And this was a real occasion of looking to use, the likes of Mariona Caldente and Frida Marnham. And they were so effective centrally, weren't they, Arsenal? Because last year there was a lot of crossing, a lot of wide play and getting into the box that didn't really work. But everything coming as well from Leah Williamson out from the back. So the
Yeah.
spine of the team was so, so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's even reflect back to the Manchester United game. I think obviously it was quite early on into what Renee was doing, and you could see she had the ideas and she needed the time. And I think if you look at that, even in that game, I was so frustrated watching it from the sidelines because I kept thinking we're playing that ball across the box, playing it out wide, overlapping run across the box, pulling it back to nobody because Russo's still, deep, trying to play, be involved in the build-up play. And we'd really got, I think, frustrated in that idea that we couldn't play Russo because of that. We couldn't play her as a striker and we couldn't get the strengths that of hers that we know she has. And then all of a sudden Arsenal have decided to really utilise those key players who are so good in that central region. I think we really missed out on that. Obviously, we've seen that with Frida Marnham, I think, who's been exceptional at that, really involved in that build-up play centrally, bringing Russo into that, and then even having Stina Blackstenius able to come on and make those runs in behind. And you've got a player like Mariona who can put those balls in, which was an excellent assist, by the way. I think that wasn't talked about enough, really. She just flicked that on so casually. We almost really did, it was all happening so quickly. You can't really believe that it was happening. But I think you're right. Look at sort of what we've done with the centre back, partnership in Catley and Williamson. Williamson playing the balls, through the lines, really stepping forward, and then having McCabe able to go forward. Her and Fox have been exceptional at being attacking fullbacks, but I think the concern we had was defensively we were poor as well. And I think if we look at the way we fixed that, we've still allowed, the fullbacks to get forward, but we've built sort of a thing that I always talked about with Leah Volti coming back into this side, and she provides such, I think, defensive stability. The amount of times that we nearly got countered and she would win that ball back straight away, and same with Cooney Cross coming on as well. I think it's huge for us. So this is how they're going to play, that they get those partnerships right and they build that team. And I'm looking at this team that played against Spurs and I'm thinking, wow, like I feel like we finally got. Yes, maybe the opposition wasn't, testing us as much as other oppositions might, but we've still had tough tests, and I do think there's more to come. And I'll be interested to see how Arsenal cope if they're tested more defensively. I'm looking forward, obviously, to the future and games like City, Chelsea, but right now it looks good, and it just depends if we can cope with that tougher challenge and still play the football that we've been playing.
Yeah, it does amaze me looking down the team sheet when you see Van Domselaar maybe some concerns under kicking, in terms of kicking under Jonas Eidevall. Leah Williamson, mistakes in the last
Yeah.
international break. Mariona Caldente, can we get the best out of her? Kim Little and Leah Valti were off it at the start of Renee Slegers' term. Frida Marnham in and out the side. Alessia Russo was just completely failing to score under Jonas Eidevall, and not for the want of trying. And then, however many games later, we're saying, well, Kyra Cooney-Cross, these people can't get into the side, Rosa Kafaji, and not because Arsenal aren't letting them. It's just the fact that actually these players have found form again. And I think for so many to individually have, be very off colour, but then quickly get back to their best under Renee Slegers has been really, really encouraging. And ultimately, we're not going to know exactly why and how unless we're in the dressing room. But definitely tactically, I think these players and to really put emphasis on that number 10 role as well, and to really encourage this attacking football, I think has been really positive. And yeah, look, we exploited Spurs very effectively, didn't we? I mean, I was looking at the team sheet pre-match and almost thinking Drew Spence in the number 10 role, who's probably one of the better defensive midfielders in that team, and that was definitely sort of the thing I was looking at in terms of exploiting through the middle of the pitch, and they sort of dropped into a 5-4-1, but it wasn't a low block as well, so they were
Yeah.
leaving space in behind, but there was so much space in between the midfield and the defense, and Frida Marnham, Mariona, these are the games that you get the best out of them, and Marnham was excellent, but yeah, as you say, you still need the finishing to come, and Russo and Blacksteny are scoring goals that you think back to the City game when they both missed one-on-ones. That's where we have seen the improvement, and it looks like the pressure's off them a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we Renee talks about this, those small margins, that was what Arsenal were struggling with. I do think it's obviously that is a huge factor, but if we're looking, all the things that you've just listed, if you look at every single player in that side, especially that starting 11 that was up against Spurs, every single player has improved drastically. I don't know if it's the team playing with confidence as a whole or if it's her working with individuals, but you've seen it with literally everybody, even players who were already good have improved. And I can't think of one player who's not improved in that starting 11. Even Catley coming in, I think that's gone under the radar, coming in at centre back and doing that role so well, all the way to Manu and Russo working as a partnership, even though last season we were so frustrated by it not working. So that's not even, that's missing out Caitlin Ford, who's I think's been fantastic as well. So it's a great problem to have that there's too many players for us to talk about in terms of improving, and even players coming off the bench as well. Zinsberger coming in when needed in those other fixtures. Mead, she's been utilised in and out of the starting 11, and I think she's still been okay at times. So it's a great problem to have, but we're going to be here all day complimenting the players and yeah, who I didn't expect we'd be here, to be honest. So it's great to be it's great to be back talking like this and not having to be so negative as well.
I'd love to point fans in the direction of the piece you wrote yesterday about the Renaissance, which I've sort of claimed credit for.
Copyrighted, yeah.
Until someone yesterday sent me a tweet from 2 weeks before I first put the phrase out there, which surprised me. But they got in there very, very early. We're quite bold with that. But definitely the Renaissance has become very popular now. And one thing you talked about is it's more than just tactical adjustments. It's about confidence. You said Renee's given the players the freedom to excel, and it's clear they're playing with a newfound belief in themselves. I wanted to sort of ask you about that because, as we said, you're not in the dressing room. We're not listening to these conversations. So when you're writing that and talking about confidence, is that from listening to people like Beth Mead, Emily Fox today, or is it a body language thing? Is it a tactical thing as well, where you can tell the decisions the players are making? How do we know, sort of apart from what the players are saying, how can we see it on the pitch that this confidence is back?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, you can take a lot from the press conferences. That sort of question has been posed, I think, many times to many different people who have been, beside Renee in those press conferences, especially today. But obviously, it seems like me and Fox are just on the same wavelength there because she answered the exact same way. She said it was a confidence. She said it was a belief in ourselves and in other people and having those connections. She referenced somebody asked her about the McCabe thing and how they, did that defensively. That she said that they understood and if she wants to get forward, Katie knows to stay back and things like that. So I think that is something you can tell. I think there was a lot of times when we were poor defensively where it was obvious there wasn't confidence and there was a lot of lack of communication. We saw that, we had, I think it was the Bayern game, which was one of the worst for me in terms of there was no communication and everybody sort of looked a bit out of place, looked a bit lost, looked like they didn't really know that they were playing together and where everybody was going to be. And then all of a sudden, I think you're right that entire body language and everything has shifted. And now, even if we do get countered or a team looks to come up against us, Leah, I thought Williamson was so switched on, against Spurs, even when they did try and, counter. You've got a goalkeeper who's switched on when a shot comes out of nowhere. You've got fullbacks who understand each other. I spoke in the piece about Catley as well because I think that's huge. You know, her being in that and being that left-footed centre back and stepping into that role and allowing others to get forward. And I'm just rambling about the same things, but I think it is. It's a sense of confidence and it's a sense of understanding of each other. And I think that's what Renee's focused on. It's that teamwork on the pitch. And also Fox talked about, you know, wanting to win and wanting to do that for the team and for the fans and for the club as a whole. And I think it's a combination of many factors. And it's all working out in her favour so far, which is great.
I mean, one thing if she does get till the end of the season, I am interested to see if she does rotate a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think it's easy when you've maybe got a 5 game window to think, well, I know obviously she'll think a little more holistically and think, these players, we don't want to burn them out. But when you know they're your players for 5 games and that's all you're focused on, it is easier to pick your best team every week with less of a view to sort of long-term rotation. So I do think that is a bigger test of her if she does get it sort of longer term or till the end of the season, because often, when you look down the starting 11, there's normally 8 players who are sort of in there consistently. There are very few changes made, and longer term, I think that will be more of a challenge of her management if she does get the job. So, do you agree that almost the fact she's had such a short period, there's probably less pressure on her to do things like maybe bring through young players, rotate the squad, and obviously she's used her substitutes effectively, but longer term, we're going to have to see a little bit more rotation, you'd expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the other side of the tough fixture list that she's had. The sort of she got sort of gets let off in a way because she has to play that strong side, and people won't really, complain too much about her not making those rotational changes, not playing sort of Kafaji. And I think when she brought in Mariona, I was a little bit skeptical, which is crazy because she's a fantastic player. But I thought, don't disrupt the rhythm. And then after releasing the piece, I think one of the comments that somebody made was, I am worried about Fox and McCabe, who I think they've played every single game under Renee, and how that will, stretch out across the whole season. I think that's a huge concern. And I think Arsenal will have to consider that obviously going into transfer windows as well, not just looking at the squad that we have. I think she's used 19 players, and if we're being honest, some of those were Katie Reid coming on for 5 minutes. So it's not like she's, utilised the squad to its potential. Obviously, there's certain players who haven't really been involved. But I do think, you've got to say, like you said earlier, you can only do what's in front of you. I think going into those games, if the cups come along and we get through in the cups and we've got maybe those opponents where we've already qualified and we can rotate, it will be interesting to see how she sort of deals with that. Will she still go with those core players and swap a few out, or will she try and basically implement it with a whole new team, which, as you know, is not an easy thing to do. The style of football is there, but can you do that with a different starting 11? It's a difficult task. And I yeah, I know I don't want to go too much into it. We will talk about this obviously tomorrow with Renee, but I think that would be sort of something that would be a test for her, and I'm interested to see hopefully if she does get that opportunity, how she would fare with that really.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's referenced staying in the moment. If I had a Renee Slegers bingo card with press conferences, that would be top of it, because I think she said it again today. But I do think, as much as it's maybe media speak, I think she does genuinely mean it. She has been so busy in this role, suddenly front and center of one of the biggest, women's football clubs, if not the biggest in the world, fan base wise, financially wise, and how well known Arsenal women are, from going as almost a backroom staff member and as assistant coach to suddenly leading that following the departure of Jonas Eidevall, who's, Jonas out was scribbled on the walls. It was, and all the talk, some of it probably you could agree with more, but about fan toxicity, the pressure that's on the manager, and for her to come in, she isn't gonna. I do think there is truth when she says, I'm really not thinking about the job long term, because I think the day-to-day routine of coming in and doing that job, especially when you're playing sort of Saturday, then Thursday, as we are this week, traveling to Italy last week, some of these tough away games. I do think there is truth in when she says, I've literally just gone game by game and putting my best team out and doing my best and keeping her head down. She said today she's going to have 3 days off in the international break, and she's going to be back at the training ground. And I think she's been an incredibly loyal servant to Arsenal in these 5 games, and well, plus the couple before we found out she was staying on a little bit longer. And I think whatever happens, she will take a lot of confidence away from this spell. But I don't know about you, but I do. I think there's a lot of truth in her saying, I've really not thought a lot about the future, because the games have come so thick and fast. And even as the interim manager, there's obviously less pressure, but there's still, when you're stepping out of places like the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, where you can remember losing last year, and only a few weeks ago, she would have probably never dreamed she would have been in that position.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree, and I think it's a difficult role to take. It is a high pressure environment. She's never strayed away from admitting that though either, which is great. She talks about Arsenal as a big club. She talks about being here, why she wanted to come here. And I think what will help her is Arsenal. The majority of the fans who are loyal, who go week in, week out, have got behind her extremely well. And I think obviously that part of that is the onus out debate. It is coming off those poor results, and obviously as fans, you just want Arsenal to win. I was at the Emirates when we were 3-0 up after 25 minutes against Brighton, and the crowd was shocked really because I don't think that really they were expecting what she's done, and I think we have got behind her. We always will, but even more so, coming into this role and being under pressure, we know what the expectations are, and so does she. So obviously, yeah, we'll get into it more when we know more. But I'm interested to see what happens next, and I do think there's a lot of confidence in her despite the pressure that she's been under already, and hopefully, she'll be able to settle into that more, and we'll kind of see what happens from there, really.
Well, we'll continue on that tomorrow. We are going to do an instant reaction live stream over on the Guna Fanzine YouTube channel. That's going to kick off. I've scheduled it for about 10:15 to allow for any extra time and for me to wrap up my coverage of Arsenal women versus Juventus. We're going to have Susie there battling the cold for her pictures, and I'll be covering it from home. So we'll have the usual live blog and player ratings. But yeah, head over to the YouTube channel for post-match instant reaction, and we'll record that as well. So if you're traveling home from the game and you can't make it, then it'll be uploaded at a later date. But then that'll nicely round off this block of games as we go into the international break. Before we talk about the England squad, Daisy, we are going to discuss the news at the Bayern Munich game. All of the controversy, all of the limited options Arsenal faced after the men playing Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup was given priority over the women playing Bayern Munich in the Champions League, despite the women's game being scheduled there first. What have Arsenal learnt from this? Because top of my list is the fact that one, we need to have a backup venue for next season, and we need to make it clear that games can change. And two, are we going to have to put tickets on sale at a later date in future so this doesn't happen? So if we are moving to a backup venue, we're not having to refund fans, put them on sale again, and then dish out vouchers for free WSL games and £20 at the Armory, which I'm not sure what that gets you, but not too much if recent calculations and trips there are anything to go by. So Arsenal have tried to appease the fans in a way. But a good sort of 4,000 or 5,000 who bought tickets originally are going to miss out. What's your overall take of the situation? Not just the fact that the game got moved in the first place, the fact it's at Meadow Park, and there are probably going to be more frustrated fans than happy ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a tough situation. When we spoke about it originally, I still couldn't find where I sat with it all because I was frustrated at the start. I still am frustrated, in a way. I think obviously this has been mishandled. We talked about that. Communication was poor. The situation is poor. It no matter what they meant by it, and no matter the circumstances, it's always going to come across in some way like the women were a second choice. I think this is a huge fixture. I really do. I think obviously we look, at the table in general, but also coming off, what was an awful defeat against Bayern and wanting to prove something. I know we know what Meadow Park is. It's great. It means a lot to us, but I think Arsenal would have sold a lot more tickets. And I think now I'm going to have to go into a ticket war again, which is not good. But yeah, it's such a tough one. I really am just frustrated by the situation. I think it's frustrating as well that we would have to find sort of that second venue. It's hard to decide what we do with that because obviously playing games like this at the Emirates is what it's all about. I think that's what we're building towards. That's what the club is building towards. So it does feel like a step backwards in that sense. And is there another option in general? I'm not sure. Like, should we have got priority because we had that fixture first potentially? There'll be a lot of people that will disagree with that, but it's such an interesting one, and it's hard to sort of not be annoyed at how it was handled, and also just what's happened in general. Not really having a plan, I think, was the big
Yeah.
problem.
So initially, we're told that Meadow Park, obviously home of Boreham Wood, who play in the National League South. So actually, when we do compare it to Juventus's ground in Biella, it's in terms of men's football, it's actually the level below because that was fifth tier. But obviously, the investment Arsenal put into Meadow Park as sort of a second home. It is a really good ground, and we're still not quite sure as to what it didn't fit with UEFA regulations. But what I do wonder is if UEFA have granted Arsenal special dispensation, then there can't be anything that serious with it. And that means in future, surely Arsenal can now go to UEFA and say, look, really appreciate that. What's stopping us playing there again and
Yeah.
registering it as a backup venue? Because UEFA aren't often as flexible as this. So the fact that, if there is something at Meadow Park, I mean, it could be really, really, like a barrier for photographers or the floodlight length or anything. It could be a really small thing, but it might almost work out really well for Arsenal that now they can turn around to UEFA and say, well, we can play here in future because obviously they did in the qualifying games. The rules must be different for the group stage. Look, I was in Italy last week and there were non-league grounds. I've covered, my local team, Hitchin Town. They play in the seventh tier of English football. And I've been to better grounds than that last year. As much as we had a great time in Italy, it was really badly managed for press, not an uncomfortable press box. The speakers were right behind us and there was a sand pit around the edge of the pitch where you do your long jump. So if that had been granted, UEFA regulations, then I don't see what the issue is with Meadow Park. Hopefully, Arsenal, can have it as a backup in future. The problem for me is if Arsenal, I know we're only getting sort of 5,000-7,000 for these Champions League games, but if that goes up and up and up, and then you're suddenly having to drop back to Meadow Park, it is. We've talked about it before, the Emirates and Meadow Park debate, and that you are just going to have two such different attendances.
Yeah.
It's going to become quite difficult, and that's where maybe somewhere like Brentford might have been a decent alternative for this. What do you make of Arsenal trying to sort of appease the fans a little bit and what they've put on offer for them?
It's an interesting one. I mean, to what you're saying in terms of Meadow Park, obviously a great ground, and I think in terms of those qualifying games, it made a lot of sense. I mean, it still wasn't really that, it wasn't sold out, it wasn't
No.
extremely packed like it was, but I reflect back on last season, looking at the Brighton game, final game of the season, obviously huge game in terms of people wanting to get tickets and obviously Miedema's last game and things like that. That was a war for tickets and it was awful. And if Arsenal continue to grow and develop, which I think they will, and more people will come on board and hopefully more attendances will grow. Like you say, then dropping it back, I just think it's going to cause so many problems. I mean, in terms of people already having the tickets, and then having to not have them anymore, I think is frustrating as well. In terms of the free ticket, is it a free ticket and £20
So
to
it's one
bet?
or the other. So it's either a free
Oh,
ticket to WSL game at the Emirates. So obviously, if you're a season ticket holder or a home advantage pack holder, you're then going to be left with the option of a Armory voucher, or I guess you give free tickets to one of your mates, and you go along for a day out. But I think that's the difficult thing, and the fact that the season ticket holders don't have their sort of usual priority status for these
yeah,
tickets going on sale, so it does become even more of a free for all. And obviously, free tickets to a WSL game. If you're a loyal Arsenal fan, say travels from the Netherlands and you've booked flights and hotels, for example, or some Bayern fans might well miss out as well.
yeah,
That's not going to mean anything to you. £20 Armory voucher when you've got to refund flights and hotels or anything. No, to come to London at that time in winter, might not be the most appealing thing for everyone if you're coming over from abroad, or maybe it will, I don't know. But I think we knew that the fallout wasn't going to be good. We knew that Arsenal were not going to fully get back into the good books of fans, and I don't think that's going to massively appeal to a lot. Maybe it will to some, but I think the good thing is, footballing wise, is that it's at a home ground. It's not at a Brentford or a Milton Keynes, God forbid, and that Arsenal's record at Meadow Park is really good. I couldn't find the last time we've lost there in the Champions League. We were talking to Adam Salter the other day, going back through the Wikipedia pages, and I was sort of trying to flick back through all the women's Champions League records and stuff, and it took me a long time to find the last time we lost there in the Champions League. So that's definitely a good thing. The atmosphere will be amazing. We've obviously had less of Meadow Park this season, so to go back there for those lucky fans who are there, because it always is a bit of a lottery, and you always feel that extra bit of privilege almost when you do go through the turnstiles that you're there, and as you say, you have beaten that ticketing war. Footballing wise, it might work out perfectly.
yeah, absolutely. Let's look at the bright side of the situation if there is one. And I have heard that there's potential conversations about trying to get those season ticket holders the potential to get that priority. I don't know if that's confirmed, but I know that that was a big concern from the supporters club as well, that had happened. I do think that is frustrating. I can understand that, not getting priority to tickets that you'd already organised and already bought and things like that. But yeah, in terms of Meadow Park, I mean, I think it's fantastic. Those qualifiers, even before the competition had even started, the crowd was amazing. The support was amazing. People were coming out of their numbers midweek. And I really enjoyed it. And I do think, it to be there would be fantastic. And I do hope that it would impact positively on the way that we perform. But I also can't stop thinking about how good it would have been at the Emirates, under lights, European night against Bayern Munich, point to prove, and things like that. So it's a tough one in that sense, but like you say, it's happened now, and it's just about Arsenal really learning from that, and hopefully, not letting the supporters and everyone down again. Really, I think it's that's the frustrating part. It's being let down, and after all the efforts that they put in and we put in, it is a bit disappointing.
Yeah, it obviously drew criticism from the supporters club at the time, and I'm sure that Arsenal will be, relieved that they have sorted this just in terms of getting the fans back on side. But I still think it'll take a little bit longer to maybe get some of that trust. But I just think next season, when these fixtures are out, we're going to go, look, let's again be ambitious, put them all at Emirates Stadium. But if we can't and something comes up, and almost accept and say it publicly that if the men's game comes up, they're going to have priority because
Yeah,
it's almost been like an unsaid thing, and they're almost a little bit embarrassed to say it, perhaps in terms of the communication. We know why the men have taken priority, but Arsenal haven't come out and said, "Oh, this is why the game's been moved." There's still a little bit sort of wishy-washy in terms of the club statement. So I think next year it is just that greater transparency, having the backup plan there, and maybe again putting tickets on sale closer to the time of the game, because obviously it's great to have give fans the option, but if we get to say December and we know what the group games are, and you're going to put all the tickets on sale a couple of weeks before for a massive game like Bayern, you're still going to get thousands turning up to the Emirates. And if it
yeah.
has to be part, you're going to sell it out, so you're not going to lose too much there. But yeah, interesting to see what Arsenal do going forward. But the good thing is we have a venue to play the game, and it is a home venue. So we look forward to that one. Just finally, international break coming up. It's a Conti Cup. There's a game tonight, but there's also a couple of weekend Conti Cup games, which is really interesting. But obviously, the one WSL game coming up on the weekend, Chelsea against Manchester United, which, as a neutral in that, it's going to be really going to be a cracker. So looking forward to that. Is it on the Sunday?
The Man United Chelsea, I think, is
Yeah,
the Sunday. Yeah, I think
perfect.
so. Anyway,
I have a
it's
free.
a
I'm
huge
covering.
clash. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm covering Chesterfield in the cold on Saturday, and then I
Oh
have
yeah, much
free.
better than watching Chelsea. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'll look forward to that on Sunday afternoon. But then after that, we have a lot of Arsenal interest as always in the international break. But it's always great as well when Arsenal players play against each other, and we are likely to see that. It's hard to imagine Emily Fox and Leah Valti not starting for the USA and Switzerland respectively. But three Arsenal players in Sarina Wiegman's senior England squad. There's plenty more in the youth squads as well. Leah Williamson, of course, the captain, Beth Mead, and Alessia Russo. Lotta Wubbenmoy misses out. Not a massive surprise to me when you see players like Gabby George, who have had a good start to the season and are playing regularly for Manchester United. If you're injured or not playing regularly, you have to be one of Sarina Wiegman's favourites and a regular player for England, don't you? And Lotta's often been in squads, but not a regular starter. I feel like at the peak of her form last season, she finally got that opportunity. I think for the game against Austria, when we were banging on Serena's door for a long time, go and get her into the squad. Not a massive surprise to me that she narrowly misses out this time. And look, she's got work to do, and that's not a criticism of her. It's more praise for the likes of Steph Catley, but Lotta and Laia Kadina have got work to do to get back into the Arsenal side before they can think about England.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've got to score the winning goal in the Euros final to get into Serena's squad, despite not playing. And obviously, this is a huge experimentation squad for Sarina Wiegman. We've seen names in there that haven't had so much of a chance really, and there's a point to prove now. We're counting down to a huge tournament. You've got the likes of like Ruby Mace, like you say, Gabby George coming into there, hoping Serena gives opportunities to players like Aggie Beever-Jones and things like that. But we're not talking about England, we're talking about Arsenal. So, yeah, I think Leah Williamson is going to be a huge one that I'm going to watch. I think obviously she had a tough time with England in the last camp. She's coming in now, I think, a much better, more confident player than she was. Obviously, we know Sarina really trusts in Leah. She is the captain. I do expect her to play. And very excited to see Emma Hayes return. I think it's going to be a fantastic game in all. I'm already thinking to that US game. Emily Fox, one of my favourite Arsenal players coming up. I don't know who to root for, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting to watch. The obviously the Arsenal players playing. Beth Mead as well, obviously has played for Arsenal, but maybe not as much as I'm
Mm.
trying to think. She's coming in and out of of that side a little bit. Yeah, and I think it's going to be an interesting, one to. I think Russo as well coming into that side. She's been under criticism maybe as well in that previous England camp. A lot of the Arsenal players that were in that last camp, I thought were getting a lot of the stick and were under a lot of pressure and a lot of criticism. And it's interesting now that Arsenal have sort of improved their form. We're getting more consistency. How can they take that into the international games? I know that's hugely important for them, and obviously for the players like Leah Williamson as well. That's so important that she. That goal we saw when she scored that goal for England, what it meant to her. So it's one to keep an eye on, and yeah, I'll be keeping an eye on Emily Fox, and hopefully I want her to do well, but not too well, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'm hoping to be at Bramall Lane because obviously it's just up the
Yeah,
road from me and Derby. I'm hoping to be at that for the Switzerland game, and I've been
yeah,
watching closely for Wembley. 80,000 tickets, sold there. There's been talk about, obviously some of the attendances have dropped off and maybe a little more steady now. But I think for England and the Lionesses to be getting such incredible crowds every time they go to Wembley and selling out stadiums around the country really shows, the popularity of them that's been taking on since around Euro 2022. And it's great to see. And obviously that brings that further pressure, doesn't it, for the likes of Leah Williamson and Alessia Russo. And it did strike me right in the article yesterday that both of them, since the last international break, have come on leaps and bounds again for Arsenal. Have been two-star performers for their club, and if you're Sarina Wiegman, you thought that's massive. To have Williamson back to full confidence and to her best.
yeah. And Serena's obviously the squad in general. Like I say, I don't think it's obviously the strongest. Obviously there's key players missing. Like obviously Lauren Hemp in terms of England is a huge miss. Maybe not in terms of Arsenal's t chances of actually overtaking City potentially, but I think yeah, it's obviously huge confidence as well. Also to the continuity, I think if they go into international breaks and it's hard for them and then they come back to Arsenal, that does impact how they perform. So hopefully they take the form that I mean England in general need to perform. We saw what they did against Germany coming back like that, but also the nature of the way that they conceded those goals. A tough test against South Africa. It's going to be another tough test. I know people have talked about the US squad maybe not being the strongest either, but it's a blockbuster. It's a blockbuster at Wembley. That's why they've done it. It's a huge Sarina Wiegman versus Emma Hayes storyline, and we'll be keeping an eye on our players and hoping that they can show the performances that we've seen from them in recent games. So yeah, it's exciting times. I'm going to be there. Can't wait. But yeah, and also Bramall Lane as well. Another great one. Seeing Leah Volti, obviously a fantastic player for us and even for our national side as well. So it's going to be a good run of fixture. I'm not even sure when that I think that's December, that other one, isn't it? So
Yeah, December the 3rd, because I've got a uni thing until 5, and then I'm hoping to jump on the first train up
yeah,
to Sheffield to make it to Bramall Lane. It's that time of year when you really have to wrap up warm for these games as well. But yeah,
yeah.
Wembley against the USA and Emma Hayes' return. There's just so many storylines around Emma Hayes. I don't think it matters what she does now. It's just, yeah, I think the media will really enjoy being able to interview her, when she comes back over. So yeah, lots to look forward to as ever in the international break. Make sure you join myself and Daisy tomorrow night, 10:15, instant reaction to Arsenal women versus Juventus. Whatever's gone on in the game, we'll be looking back on it and discussing what's next for Arsenal in their managerial search and whether Renee Slegers should stay on. A lot of fans saying yes, and quite a few in the media saying the same as well. So Daisy, I'll see you tomorrow night.
Yeah, looking forward to it.